How Ilorin became a caliphate. This story is inspired by true historical events. While based on credible historical sources, some scenes and dialogue are creative interpretations designed for dramatic effect. In the dying days of the 18th century, when the mighty Oyo Empire stretched its fingers across Yorubaland like a giant shadow, there was a town called Ilorin, built where the savannah met the forest, where Yoruba farmers traded with Fulani herdsmen. It was a place where worlds collided and cultures blended like rivers meeting the sea. But empires, like men, grow old, and old empires make dangerous enemies of their own sons. The rebels' Gamble Kakanfo Afonja was no ordinary field marshal. Appointed by the Alifin as the highest military commander of Oyo's northern territories, he ruled from Ilorin with the authority of a king but the restraints of a vassal. The year was 1817, and the Oyo Empire was fracturing from within. Corrupt kings, endless wars, and a bureaucracy that devoured gold faster than the mines could produce it. When the Alifin summoned Afonja for yet another costly campaign against the Fulani settlements, something snapped. Standing in his war council chamber, maps of Yorubaland spread before him like prophecy. Afonja made a decision that would reshape West Africa forever. No more, he declared to his generals, his voice cutting through the humid night air. I will not spend Ilorin's blood for Oyo's pride. The rebellion began not with armies, but with a single word: no. The scholar's arrival, but every revolution needs more than anger. It needs vision. And vision arrived in Ilorin in the form of a Fulani scholar whose presence would prove more dangerous than any army. Shehu Alimi came quietly, an Islamic scholar whose reputation for wisdom had spread across the savannah like wildfire. He was neither young nor old, with eyes that seemed to hold the depth of ancient texts and hands that moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades shaping minds. The Fulani and Hausa communities in Ilorin welcomed him as a teacher and spiritual guide. But Afonja saw something more: an opportunity. In this learned man, he saw the key to legitimizing his rebellion, to transforming his defiance from mere rebellion into something greater. Teach my people, Afonja told Alimi during their first meeting in the moonlit courtyard of Ilorin's main mosque. Show them that there is power beyond Oyo's reach. Alimi's response was measured, careful. I teach only the word of Allah and the path of righteousness. But perhaps that is exactly what your people need. What neither man fully understood was that they were lighting a fuse that would burn all the way to Sokoto. The alliance of necessity. When the Alifin finally moved to crush Afonja's rebellion, the unlikely allies found themselves fighting side by side. Oyo's punitive force arrived at Ilorin's gates like a storm cloud, 1,000 strong, expecting to sweep away the rebellion with overwhelming force. But they had not counted on the transformation that had taken place within Ilorin's walls. Under Alimi's influence, the diverse population, Yoruba, Fulani, Hausa, had found unity in Islamic brotherhood. The scholar had done more than teach. He had forged a new identity. When the battle came, it was not just Afonja's warriors who stood on the walls, but an entire community fighting for something larger than tribal loyalty. The siege lasted 7 days. On the 8th dawn, Afonja led a desperate sortie that shattered Oyo's lines and sent their remnants fleeing northward. But victory came with a price that would prove far steeper than anyone imagined. The price of power. In the months following their triumph, the delicate balance between Afonja and Alimi began to shift. The alliance that had saved Ilorin from Oyo's wrath soon turned against Afonja himself. The scholar's influence grew daily, his followers multiplied, and his vision of an Islamic emirate under the Sokoto Caliphate gained momentum among the people. Afonja found himself trapped in a web of his own making. He had invited the wolf to drive away the leopard, only to discover that wolves have their own appetites. The end came not in glorious battle, but in betrayal. During a community gathering in 1824, as tensions reached their breaking point, Afonja was assassinated by the very Fulani and Hausa warriors he had armed and empowered. The revolution had devoured its own father. The scholar's empire, when Shehu Alimi died in 1820, his eldest son Abdul Salam inherited not just his father's spiritual authority, but control of an Islamic emirate that now pledged allegiance to the Sokoto Caliphate. The transformation was complete. What had begun as a Yoruba rebellion against Oyo had become a Fulani emirate under northern Islamic rule. Abdul Salam was no mere scholar like his father. He was a warrior priest who understood that empires are built with steel as much as scripture. He led jihad campaigns southward, seeking to expand the caliphate's reach toward the coast, though he was ultimately stopped at Osogbo in 1840. Under his rule, Ilorin became something unprecedented in West African history, a bridge between worlds. Throughout the 19th century, it served as a major trade node between the Hausa and Yoruba peoples, channeling goods, ideas, and Islamic influence deep into the heart of Yorubaland. The Emirates' warriors carried the green banners of Islam into territories that had known only traditional gods. They built mosques where shrines once stood, established Quranic schools where griots had sung ancient tales, and imposed Islamic law where customary traditions had reigned for centuries. The legacy of transformation, what made Ilorin's transformation so remarkable, was not just its speed, but its completeness. In less than 2 decades, a Yoruba military outpost had become the southernmost emirate of the largest Islamic empire in West Africa. The city's very architecture told the story. Yoruba compounds stood beside Fulani pavilions. Traditional Yoruba drums echoed alongside the calls to prayer, and the local dialect became a unique blend of Yoruba, Hausa, and Arabic influences. The emirate's influence extended far beyond its borders. It served as the launching point for Islamic expansion into Yorubaland, the testing ground for policies that would later be implemented across the Sokoto Caliphate, and the proof that the jihad movement could successfully integrate diverse populations under Islamic rule. But perhaps most significantly, Ilorin represented the complex reality of empire building in pre-colonial West Africa. It was a place where political calculation met religious fervor, where local grievances became the catalyst for broader transformations, and where the ambitions of individual leaders could reshape the destinies of entire peoples. The storm that changed everything, standing in the ruins of what had once been Afonja's stronghold, gazing out over a city that now bore the crescent moon banner of the Caliphate, one could see the terrible irony of history. The Yoruba warrior who had refused to serve one empire had inadvertently created the conditions for another to take root in his homeland. The scholar who had come seeking only to teach had become the architect of conquest. The rebellion that had begun as a cry for independence had ended in submission to a power even more distant than the one they had overthrown. Yet in the minarets that rose above Ilorin's skyline, in the schools where children learned Arabic alongside Yoruba, In the markets where traders from across West Africa gathered under Islamic commercial law, there was undeniable proof of transformation. Ilorin had not simply changed hands, it had changed its very soul. The emirate would endure for nearly a century more, resisting British colonial advances and maintaining its Islamic character even as the world around it transformed. When the British finally occupied the city in the 1890s, they found not a conquered territory, but a sophisticated Islamic state with its own laws, customs, and unshakable identity. The fire that had consumed Afonja's rebellion had indeed forged an empire. But like all empires built from the ashes of the old, it carried within it the seeds of both greatness and inevitable change. The wheel of history, once set in motion, never stops turning. In the end, Ilorin's transformation from Yoruba garrison town to Islamic emirate stands as testament to a fundamental truth, that in the crucible of West African politics, survival belonged not to the strongest or the purest, but to those who could adapt, absorb, and ultimately transcend the limitations of their origins. The Caliphate had come to Ilorin not through conquest from without, but through revolution from within. And in that transformation lay both triumph and tragedy, the birth of a new world and the death of an old one, forever intertwined in the red earth of a city that had dared to change its destiny. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories of African empires, forgotten kingdoms, and the warriors who shaped history. Like this video if you want to see more tales of power, betrayal, and transformation from the heart of West Africa. What other African historical figures would you like us to explore? Let us know in the comments below.